We'll get started. I'm Bill Capin. I'm an assistant professor at the Harvard Graduate School of Education. And welcome back to those of you who are able to join for our first session. This is our Usable Knowledge Live Literacy Insights series. In our first session, you may recall that we talked about the science of reading, what it is, what it's not, and how it can inform instruction, assessment, and the systems that we have in schools to support readers. So in this session, we're turning our attention to another topic highly related to the science of reading and really important to families, and that's dyslexia. So our goal in this session is to focus on what is dyslexia, to just demystify what it is and what it's not, and to explore what are the instructional practices and assessment practices that we can use in schools to improve outcomes for students with or at risk for dyslexia. Before I introduce our guests, I'm just going to say one more time, we encourage you to include in the chat your name, your location, your role, and something you might be interested in learning from today's session. As you're doing that, I'll introduce our guests. Really excited to have two guests today. The first is Nadine Gaab. She is the Silvana and Chris Pascucci professor in learning differences at the Harvard Graduate School of Education, and her work focuses on children's language and literacy development from infancy all the way from birth until adolescence. And so welcome, Nadine.
Thank you so much for having me tonight.
We're also really fortunate to be joined by Tim Odegard. Tim is the Murphy Chair of Excellence in Dyslexic Studies from Middle Tennessee State University. And Tim's work spans issues related to dyslexia identification, instruction, and is really interested in how we can support teachers, both pre-service and in-service teachers, in providing the best possible instruction for students with dyslexia. Thank you, Tim.
Oh, thanks for having me, Phil.
So to ground our discussion, we're going to start actually with a short video clip. And this video clip is going to show a conversation that I had with Noah, an impressive young man from Louisiana who has dyslexia. So we're going to start there, and then we'll have an opportunity for our guests to respond to the clip. Hi, Noah.
Hey,
It's good to see you. Thank you for being here. We're starting today's conversation about dyslexia with your experience, because oftentimes, as we've talked about in the past, Noah, conversations about dyslexia sometimes don't include people with dyslexia. And I think the perspective of a student is really helpful as we think about the best ways we can support children with dyslexia.
my experiences were actually really hard because I was recognized late, and that was in third grade. And the only reason why I was recognized is because of my mom. So my mom, she studied and said, wait, this has some like similarities to dyslexia. So she had told the teachers about it. And I just went to go get tested, and I found out that I had dyslexia. So whenever I was reading, whenever I would have like English and all that, and like have math problems and everything like that, it was hard because I couldn't process things as fast. And it was like, okay, I'm reading this, but I'm reading slow, and I don't want to look weird in front of the other kids. And
Mm.
it was a big fitting thing. It took me long, like it took me a long, long, long time to be like accepting the fact that I am different, that I have dyslexia, that I learn different, I move different than all these other kids that I don't know if they do, but they're not struggling like me.
Mhm.
So, but now knowing that I do have it, it's like I have confidence that, oh, I have something different and I learn different, but I still get my work done. I'm as smart as all of y'all.
There's going to be a lot of educators that are going to be participating in this session. What is maybe some advice that you would provide them based on your own experience?
I would like to say, teachers, if you see something, say something. Because if you notice that a student is learning slower than all the rest of the kids and it's not like normal, go tell the parent, because the parent might not even know, because the parent isn't teaching. And or a parent or guardian isn't teaching, and you're there during school. So just see something, say something, and recognize it early so it won't be late.
Well, thanks so much, Noah. It was great to see you and
Thank
talk to you.
you.
Nadine, we'll turn to you first. What's your initial reaction to the video?
Yeah, thank you for, doing this interview with Noah. I think what, I can see in the video is the classical way to fail model where we have kids fail over a long period of time and they struggle a little bit more and more and more. And that has a tremendous toll on their mental health, on how they see themselves as learners and how motivated they are to learn and how motivated they are to go to a place that make them feel like failure every day. So I think, it really illustrates that way to fail model. And I think another aspect that it illustrates besides the mental health aspect is that, often the parents and in most cases are the moms become the case managers. They become the clinicians, they become the lionesses that fight for educational opportunities for their children.
I think that's exactly right. I mean, the disability movement has been so influenced by the impact of mothers, and certainly the case in Noah's life. And I happen to know his mother, and she's really, a unique individual. But there's so many out there that are forced to really advocate. Tim, what is your response to the video?
Well, I think the same thing that Nadine had. And so I want to reinforce something that Nadine had and put it in context. I mean, some of you as educators out there may not think that third grade is waiting too long to respond, but if you think about it, Noah's been in school for 4 years, and in the current U.S. context, literacy instruction pretty much starts on day one with foundational skills, and by the end of kindergarten, we're actually assessing and screening kids with basic reading kind of assessments. And so starting to struggle with that acquisition probably was emerging in Noah's case a long time. And what you heard Noah say was it was hard for him because he knew he was different. And that feeling of different for those of us with dyslexia is a really powerful one that you heard Noah expressing there. And it actually forces us to then think about how we can feel normalized in a setting in a way that might disadvantage in other settings because he just wants to feel so normal and he's not clear and sure about how other people are there. And that really can take a weight on your mental health and how you're feeling. The other thing that you heard Noah say was those persistent issues with reading slower, which made him know and feel different. And one of the things that we really need to highlight is that the behavioral presentation, what it looks like, is one that shifts across your literacy development, even with intervention. And there's lingering things that we'll see across languages, especially alphabetic languages like the European writing systems. And that persistently slow, disfluent reading is one of them. And you heard him say that that was impacting his ability in academics still. And so that even though he likely, and I know he has, because I know his mother, and he's a brilliant young man, he
Mhm.
got intervention, but the intervention, even even though it's really good, still can't remediate all aspects of what you see with dyslexia. Hence, we say that it persists across a lifespan in many cases.
Yeah, I love that you both touched on the mental health. I think it's under-examined. We've done some research, and what you see is increased levels of depression among individuals with dyslexia, increased on average levels of anxiety, particularly academic anxiety. I know before going into academia, I was a special ed teacher and I taught students in the upper elementary grades, like fourth, fifth grade. And by the time I was teaching them in a contained setting where they were getting a lot of specialized instruction. By the time they came to me, their sense of self-efficacy was really impacted. And so I loved when he said, if you see something, say something. Um, I want to turn to Noah's story and where I think it sheds light on an issue that a lot of parents and educators share with me is that we're not always sure, even when we're really well intentioned, what dyslexia is. And so both of you were recently on a committee formed by the International Dyslexia Association, charged with updating the organization's definition of dyslexia. So Nadine, I wonder if you could help us sort of understand what is dyslexia, starting with like sort of a basic understanding, something that might be really clear to teachers or family members who may not be very familiar with it.
Yeah. Thank you so much for the opportunity. Dyslexia is a specific learning disability in word reading. And it's really important that we emphasize the word reading piece as one of the fundamental challenges that, these students experience. So later on, they may experience problems with reading fluency and reading comprehension, but the initial problem presents on the word reading level. And it involves the accuracy of reading words, the speed, which, can vary depending on the orthography. So we have dyslexia in all languages, in all written languages. And so that's important to keep in mind as well. Dyslexia is on a continuum. It's this persistent, I think that's what Tim said earlier, problem with word reading, despite, good instruction. So all your peers are excelling and they're figuring out how to like decode these words and start reading sentences. But for some reason you cannot, which, illustrates how frustrating that can be. We also know that the causes are complex and they involve combination of genes, brain development, cognitive perception, as well as the environment. And so it's a multifactorial cause. I think that's also really important to keep in mind that there is not just one cause. If we, find that we have, a good idea what to do. I think it also is important to say that these kids show difficulties with phonological and morphological processing and often early problems with oral language. So these often show up first. And then the definition also made sure to include the challenges that it can present for mental health, as well as the importance of early identification. So finding kids early, finding kids at risk early, and implementing a proactive approach instead of a reactive approach. So finding the kids who are more likely to develop problems with reading and helping them right then instead of waiting many years and reacting to their persistent challenges.
Yeah, that's a great comprehensive understanding of dyslexia. I put in the chat the IDA definition, a link to it, so people can read more about it. I think you've described what dyslexia is. I think there's also a lot of misconceptions, Nadine, about dyslexia. I know you've written about this. What are some of the common misconceptions or myths about dyslexia that you want to help make sure people understand and try to avoid?
Oh, there are so many on our website. You can find 50 or 60. I think often it's that they're flipping letters or that, the letters are jumping on the line, that, it cannot be, identified until, late elementary school. We know that the signs start as early as, age 3 or 4. And there's many more. I think, Tim has a couple more that he can, discuss.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
I'd love to hear it, Tim.
Well, one of the things, there's a myth that we're lazy and that we don't work hard. In fact, the reality is if you have a person who's struggling with this early acquisition of literacy skills, that we're probably working harder in the background. So that's one myth that I would think that I would highlight there. There's one thing that I do want to stress as a person is that one of the things that we have challenging when it comes to defining a construct is there's lots of things that are kind of associated or might happen as a result of dyslexia. And that might be a child's lived experience, but that doesn't make it central to dyslexia. So I can remember working with children I do near peer mentorship in my center, which is where I mentor young children in the center who have dyslexia, and we often do these art projects. And one of the things that they did was they actually did see wiggly lines, and we found through talking, they worked so hard and they had to focus so much on reading that it put visual strain on their eyes. And so some of these myths about visual processing differences and this visual strain could be a byproduct of the fact that the processing of the word itself and the writing of it is so challenging. And so it's challenging as we're trying to be good communicators of the reality that that is not core to dyslexia nor what it is. I didn't want to tell these two precious little girls that that wasn't their experience, but that wasn't defining.
Mhm.
Another one that's often hard because we want to have a point of empowerment. One of the things that Noah shared, one of the things that my son shared was it was hard for them to accept the label. I don't know what that meant for Noah, but I know what that meant for my son Jude. And it's often that that comes with social stigma, to feel othered than and to feel less than. And so one of the social narratives that we've created around dyslexia is one of a gift, to mean that it's imbued with a set of five potential gifts that if you have this difference in how your brain develops, that you will emanate. And that's uplifting if you think about it. It's a message of empowerment, but the challenge is like those five gifts may be present, but they may not be due to the dyslexia, and the research on it is still out there and such. So if a child is searching for their gift amongst a list of five and they can't find it, that can lead them. And I've actually had children crying in front of me because they've not found their superpower. Because they've been told that they were identified with dyslexia, and they know that that means that they are supposed to have one of these gifts. But, they're not an entrepreneur. They're not visually, artistically creative and extra things. They don't feel that they're overly creative. And so these stereotyped ideas can be really challenging. So I wouldn't construe dyslexia to be a gift, but I would say that each child probably has their own unique gift, and that's true of a child with dyslexia. And this child was one of the bravest children I know. Nadine and I both, Nadine still does MRI research, and we did some of the earliest. We kind of started doing this together. And so this little 8-year-old, she was probably one of the youngest pediatric children to go into a scanner back in the early 2000s. And she just fearlessly climbed into this scanner and didn't have to have any help to do it. And I had grown US military veterans who couldn't be in this same scanner that she just crawled up in and sat in patiently for an hour and a half. And so she's such a brave child that to think that that's not one of those five gifts that she had, but yet that was clearly her courageous gift of bravery.
Yeah. Many positive comments in the chat. And Margaret wrote, "This is such an important observation and point about how kids might perceive the gifts, quote unquote." And so thank you, Tim. I think one thing about the audience on the with us today is it's an international audience. And so I wonder, Nadine, if you could talk a little bit more about how dyslexia presents differently across orthography or languages, so people can better understand that.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, in some languages, it is just simpler or easier to learn to read, right? And we call this orthographic transparency, where, in some languages, so I learned to read in German, which for sure is, easier than learning to read in English. But in some languages, you only have one sound that goes with each letter. And so you could probably learn to read, by memorizing the sound letter association like in a day. You will not understand what you read or comprehend, but you could probably learn to decode the word out loudly. And so that's definitely one of the factors. And then I think it's also important to keep in mind that dyslexia presents differently. So in some of these languages, the emphasis is less on phonological processing, which is the ability to manipulate the sounds of language. It's a very important precursor for learning to read. But there are some languages where morphology is much more important. And so it may look very different initially when kids start struggling because, of the more, English or, centric, view on dyslexia. But in some languages, it can present primarily through, challenges with fluency. And then in others, you see more morphology or, the more traditional early signs like phonological awareness or problems, with, memorizing letter sounds, and oral language we shouldn't forget, which is a really important, part in any language, and is part of the learning to read process because we are exposed to oral language as early as in utero.
Yeah. Lots of positive comments in the chat, and I think helping to think about the orthography, how deep or shallow it is, will relate to whether the problems with dyslexia are primarily related to accuracy or rate of reading. And I think that's really helpful. Many of the folks in the chat are asking about, I think, asking us to move from what is dyslexia to what can we do to support students with or at risk for dyslexia. And I know we have many teachers or teacher educators with us today. And so, Tim, maybe we could start with you. What would you say are the most powerful instructional practices for students, particularly in the early grades? And then maybe we can think about adolescence later.
Yeah, in the early grades, as Phil, as you know, it's going to be a multi-component approach, but we really have to break apart that sound structure and link it into the written structure of language and make that very clearly linked in there. One of the things that we can't take for granted with the dyslexic learner is that they're going to be able to intuit or figure that out for themselves. So it takes a lot of directly explaining to them how the structure of the English or an alphabetic writing system, in the case of an alphabetic writing system, or a syllable-based system, such as a syllabary like Japanese and or a more graphical system like Chinese. But you have to really explain to them that relationship between the spoken language in its spoken word form into the written word. That'll also mean, especially in an alphabetic language, breaking the sound of the word down into its basic components and then able to link those back to their basic written representation. And in English, that's going to be the phoneme or the smallest unit of sound, which Nadine alluded to earlier, and truly linking that down. What we know from a substantial body of research, Colby Hall's recent meta-analysis of 40 years of dyslexia intervention highlighted this. We do this in a reciprocal relationship at the word level. We teach this to go from the sound to the print, and we go from the print to the sound. So we do this with explicit spelling instruction as well. That was also replicated in a meta-analysis by Jessica Tost recently as well as Patricia Mathis did the first meta-analysis on that, and then Steve Graham's done a couple. So we know that there's a reciprocity between those two factors. And so we want to make sure that we're giving really quality training to hear the sound structure, but importantly, put it with the letters to link it in. And we go from the spoken to the print and from the print to the spoken. We reinforce that by lots of application and practice. I think that's been one of the things that we've not really focused on enough. I think of the quality research of Jill Aller and Stephanie Alateba and their funded research down there to show the magnitude of practice, especially in, we just talked about the different types of writing system. The key thing is that the rate of learning is slower in these shallower orthographies, and what differentiates is the magnitude of practice it takes with that application to develop accuracy, with the efficiency or fluency being lagged and hard to remediate in those languages. So it's the teaching it directly, but then after you've taught a concept, you move on to having lots of practice and then applying it into the translation and practicing it for connected text, which then affords the opportunity to apply that to reading comprehension.
Yeah. So what I'm hearing is the what to teach, particularly in the early grades, is the relationship, at least in an alphabetic language, from graphemes to phonemes. So matching letters onto sounds. And then the how we teach it is through explicit, sort of direct instruction. So not a, wouldn't make much sense to have students decide which letters to focus on, but you would, focus on a set of grapheme phoneme correspondences, like letter sounds, and build over time and complexity. And it also sounded like this instruction should be sort of systematic, and it's building up to the grain size over time. So you might start with smaller words into bigger words. And then I guess the one thing we could add to the conversation is when this should occur. And maybe, Tim, when you're thinking about explicit instruction on this, when should that occur? I mean, for Noah, it might have been third grade where it sounded like he got this type of instruction. What's the ideal time?
Well, that's a question that's got layers to it. So from an intervention standpoint, Noah got it in the third grade, but when explicit instruction to explain how the code works should start at the onset of literacy instruction for all children. And then the level of intensification, not just dose. I mean,
Mm.
we're not talking about more of something. We're talking about how scaffolded and supported it is, how important it is to break it down into more fine-grained chunks, and how you can't really miss a step. And if we start in kindergarten with that, then what's really important is that we can start to identify the kids who are screening at risk of not being able to acquire those skills, and then we can quickly identify them, intensify, which also would be dosage, and then start to pull apart the kids who are responding and remediating versus those who are lagging, like Noah or my son would have. And those are the key pieces. So I would say that the direct, explicit, systematic instruction starts at day one with your learning, and that's used as the differentiator to find the kids who are persistently hard to teach with those skills. But the intensity is what matters, and that's intensified. So I don't want to say it's just about the dose. It's also about how we intensify with the scaffolding.
Yeah. And someone in the chat, I guess I want to just say, I think that's a really important point that you're drawing the distinction between intensification and dosage, which are overlapping, but intensification also relates to the type of practice that you provide, the explicitness of the instruction, the number of students in the small group, and all those factors influence the intensification. Someone in the chat asked, what if diagnosis is made late? I mean, I think the research is really clear that intervention effects are most robust in kindergarten, first grade. But we're not saying that it's too late to intervene in third grade, right? I mean, help us understand that, Tim.
Oh, so it's never too late, a slogan from
Yeah,
Will Baker and his
yeah,
Dyslexia Foundation. It's just never too late. So, we know from research that we can intervene in adulthood and actually make gains. So Hollis Scarborough and Brent Miller have done seminal research on adult literacy and training, so we know that we can do that. And the same approach and methods to break it down may be needed. We also know that it might be the case that some of the early skills in the basic words that you were highlighting in that sequence of instruction might have been remediated. So I think of some of the work, let's say, that Jessica Toss is doing right now with the larger multisyllabic words. And so we're seeing a need for continued intervention into the multisyllabic space, and that's where we intervene. So the child will help to dictate with what you're looking at in their full picture about how you need. But we see remediation work into adult literacy, and we also see it in all ages. So it's never too late. The challenge is that it makes it that much harder to move them. And I think, Phil, you know this, that the mental health challenges start to complicate and the anxiety starts to build, and that can push them away from it. So there's multiple reasons why earlier is better, and there's no reasons to not intervene even if it's late.
yeah. So Nadine, that really brings us back to something you've studied and helped to develop actually a screening platform that's used across the country. So can you tell us a little bit about like what are a couple key things that you want to see every school system do related to early screening?
Yeah, yeah. I think it's really important that you do the screening right, right? And so don't just, find some screener that someone developed, 30 years ago and passed down to you. I think there's now really good screeners, and they need to be comprehensive because there's, various reasons why a child can struggle. And so I think it's important to look at oral language and see, what are the kids' oral language skills, what are the print knowledge skills, and then really look at the various foundational skills. So one would recommend definitely phonological awareness or phonemic awareness depending on the age. You would look at something like non-word repetition. You could look at sound, letter sound knowledge, letter knowledge. You would include many other aspects that we don't have time for. And then you want to pick a really good screener and know the population and make sure that the screener actually screens for the right things, right? So if you're looking for a dyslexia screener, don't use a screener that screens for reading comprehension. It's not going to find the kids with dyslexia. I think there's good ones now out there that also have professional development built in, that tell you how to group the kids, that tell you, lesson plans, etc. So I think, we came a long way from just the idea to move to a proactive approach to actually now implementing a good approach. And it's very key for finding the kids and then, responding with evidence-based response to screening.
Yeah. So some of the key things it sounds like are comprehensive assessment, having it early, and then to use the information. It's not enough to screen, right? It's to use that information to identify those students who might need additional monitoring or, explicit instruction that Tim described. 30 minutes is not enough, but I want to say thank you, Nadine and Tim, for this conversation and for your work. I think you helped us to see dyslexia more clearly as a specific word reading challenge, and that we can address it through early identification and high quality instruction. For those that are joined us today, we will send a follow-up email with a link to the recording, some key takeaways from the session, and related resources so you can continue to engage in this topic. I also want to share that this is just the second chapter in our literacy series, and we hope you'll join us again next month. Until then, big thank you to Nadine and Tim and to everyone in the audience for the work you do, often quietly when no other adults are around, to help children and adolescents with literacy. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for having us.